So our last little thing with functions that we're going to talk about is how to write an equation in function notation. So previous video, I think I started with this is the last thing we're going to do, but I wanted to kind of separate this into short videos, so hopefully it's a little easier to watch. But anyway, if we're writing an equation in function notation, I told you a couple videos ago that f of x and y are the same thing. So if we can take an equation and solve for y, get it to be y equals something, then we can replace y with f of x, and then we can evaluate it. In this case, it says to find f of -5 and f of b. And so we can do that once we have solved for y and replaced y with f of x. So if you look at this first example, we already have y equals some stuff. And so we're just going to replace y with f of x. And so now our function is x squared plus 2x minus 3. And there's our function notation. That's the first part of the question, is to write this in function notation. Again, literally all we did was replace y with f of x. Then the next part says we're going to find f of -5. Well, now that's easier to do since we have our function notation, because we know that this -5 goes in place of x. And so we've got -5 squared plus 2 times -5 minus 3. And then we'll just simplify that. So -5 squared is 25. 2 times -5 is -10 minus 3. And you can punch all that in the calculator if you need to. Ooh, it's 5. Erase that. Alright. So you can punch all that in the calculator. And 25 minus 10 is going to be 15. 15 minus 3 is going to be 12. And so there's the second part. The last part of this one says to find f of b. And as we mentioned earlier, it just means we put b in place of x. And so we have b squared plus 2b minus 3. So there is that function notation. Now, I'd like you to work this next one on your own. So I'm going to give you about 5 seconds to pause the video, work it, write it in function notation, find f of -5 and f of b, and then I'll work it for you in just a second. So give you 5 seconds. Okay, so hopefully you have stopped the video, worked through this problem. First thing we're going to do is we're going to solve for y. We're going to get y by itself. And so we're going to subtract 2x. And we're going to get -3y is equal to -2x plus 6. And we'll divide by -3. And we get y is equal to positive 2/3 x minus 2. So we've solved for y, but our function notation is going to be f of x equals 2/3 x minus 2. That's the first part. Now, second part of the question says to find f of -5. And so we're going to take the 2/3 times -5 minus 2. And you may want to use a calculator to do this. Again, hopefully you can do that without a ton of issues. And so as we simplify, 2/3 times -5 is a -10/3. And before we can combine that with the -2, we need the 2 to be a fraction with the common denominator of 3. And so that would be 6/3. So a little side note here, if you take 2/1, and we're trying to make it be 3 on the bottom, then you'd have to multiply by 3. You got to do that on top and bottom to get the 6. That's where the 6/3 came from. That is the same thing as the -2. And so then when you simplify that, -10/3 minus 6/3 is -16/3. And then again, the last part of the question is to find f of b. And so we're just going to take the b and substitute it in. And so we have 2/3 b minus 2.